At 7:27 that evening, Captain Ika Monroe was standing at the command post of a burning apartment building. Fire crews were already inside. One resident was still unaccounted for. Dispatch had already confirmed Aisha as the incident commander. Then a police officer put her in handcuffs after a property manager accused her of making threats, impersonating command, and ordering unnecessary property damage. But the radio had already confirmed who she was. And when another officer asked the property manager what Aisha had actually said, the accusation began to fall apart. 9 minutes earlier, Engine 14 had been the first unit to reach Maple Court Apartments. Smoke was already pushing out of a second-floor hallway window. Aisha stepped down from the engine and keyed her radio. She said, "Engine 14 on scene." She gave a fast size up over the air. 2-story fire showing from side Bravo. Possible occupants remaining. Requesting the next alarm. Dispatch answered right away. Copy Engine 14. Next alarm is being dispatched. Aisha keyed her radio again. Engine 14 establishing Maple Court Command. Dispatch confirmed it. Maple Court Command established. Engine 14. With only one engine on scene, Aisha assigned her own crew to an initial attack line and held command from the front bumper. More units arrived within minutes. Engine 9 pulled up and she assigned them water supply. Truck 6 arrived next, and she sent them to search and ventilation. A third unit took evacuation on the ground floor. Firefighter Maya Chen set up the accountability board at the command post and started tracking every crew by name and assignment. The fire was only a few minutes old, and command was already functioning the way it was supposed to. Aisha had run dozens of structure fires before this one. She knew the difference between a scene that felt chaotic and a scene that was actually under control, even when it looked messy from the street. This one still felt controlled. Crews were moving with purpose. Radio traffic was orderly, and every assignment had an owner. Behind the building, a locked service door was becoming a problem. Search crews reported that smoke conditions in the rear hallway were getting worse, and they needed a second way in. The property manager, a man named Gregory Hale, told a firefighter that he had the only key, and it was back in his office. Aisha did not have time to spare. She ordered the door forced. Gregory ran toward the command post. He told her she had no right to destroy his building. Aisha told him to get behind the line, or police would move him. Firefighters forced the door and kept searching. Gregory did not look for another firefighter to argue with. He went and found a police officer. Officer Ryan Keller had been sent to help with traffic and crowd control near the scene. Gregory told him that a woman claiming to be in charge had threatened to have him removed and had ordered firefighters to break into his building after he questioned her authority. Keller walked toward the command post. He asked, "Are you the person who ordered that door broken?" Aisha answered without turning away from the accountability board. "Captain Aisha Monroe, Engine 14. I have command here." Keller told her he needed her to step aside for a minute. Aisha told him that if he was detaining her, command had to be transferred first. Keller told her she was not going anywhere until he knew who she was. Given what Gregory had told him, Keller had a real reason to ask questions. A man had just accused a stranger of threatening him and ordering property destroyed. The mistake was not that Keller walked over and asked. The mistake was in what happened over the next several minutes. At this point, nothing Keller had done was outside his job. He was standing outside the hot zone. He had not interfered with any firefighting operation, and he had a citizen complaint in hand. What mattered was what he chose to do with the minutes that followed. Keller asked for identification. Aisha handed him her department photo ID from her turnout coat. He asked what unit she was with. "Engine 14, she said. Maya spoke up from the accountability board without being asked. "She's our captain. She established command when we got here." Keller glanced at the board behind her. It read Engine 14, Command. Aisha gave him the incident number. She told him to call fire dispatch and ask who was assigned as Engine 14's officer that night. Keller keyed his police radio instead and asked the police dispatcher to verify her. Police records do not contain fire department personnel assignments, so the answer that came back was simple. Unable to verify through police CAD. Keller turned back to Aisha. Your identity still has not been confirmed. Unable to verify is not the same as disproven. The system had not rejected her identity. Keller had simply asked a database that did not contain the answer. Aisha told him again to call fire dispatch. Keller did not do it yet. This is the moment a reasonable question turned into something else. Aisha's radio crackled. Command, search group. She asked Keller if she could answer it. He told her to keep her hands where he could see them. She did. She told him that if he was going to keep her there, command needed to be handed off right now. Maya offered to radio Lieutenant Price to come take over. Keller waved her back. The radio called out again, asking command to confirm a ventilation assignment. Aisha repeated herself. Someone needs to take command. Keller told her, your department can assign someone else. Aisha answered, that transfer has to be announced and acknowledged over the fire channel. She told Keller exactly what she was about to do and why. She reached once for the command microphone, so another officer could formally take over. Keller grabbed her wrist. Aisha did not pull away. She did not run. There was no struggle. Keller ordered her hands behind her back. I am complying, she said, and put her hands behind her. The cuffs closed around her wrists. She stayed standing at the command post. She was not the picture of a person who obeyed every instruction without question, because she made one deliberate choice to reach for that radio. She was also not the picture of someone resisting arrest. She reached once after explaining herself, and then she complied completely. The fire did not pause for any of this. Lieutenant Owen Price realized Aisha could no longer answer the radio. He did not wait for permission. He keyed his radio. Dispatch, Lieutenant Price assuming Maple Court Command. Captain Monroe is unavailable. Copy. Maple Court Command transferred to Lieutenant Price. Dispatch answered. But this was not a normal handoff. Price had never received a full briefing from Aisha because she was cuffed before she could give him one. He had to piece the incident picture back together on the fly. He walked to the accountability board first, checking which crews were assigned where. He listened to the last several minutes of radio traffic to figure out what had already been ordered. He asked Maya for a quick verbal status, and she gave him a rundown of every crew's location and progress in under 30 seconds. Firefighters call this an emergency assumption of command, made because the officer holding it was suddenly taken out of the loop, with no warning and no handoff. Price kept every assignment moving. Search, fire attack, ventilation, accountability, and coordination with incoming EMS all continued under his direction. A few minutes later, the search team located an elderly resident inside apartment 212. She was conscious, showing signs of smoke inhalation, and was handed off to EMS right away. Nobody claims this rescue proves anything about who Aisha is. It happened because the crews kept working, the way they are trained to work, even while their commander stood handcuffed 20 feet away. Aisha listened to the radio, but she did not try to run a parallel operation from where she stood. She only asked Keller one question. Has the transfer been acknowledged? He did not answer her directly. Battalion Chief Thomas Reed arrived on scene a short time later. He went straight to the command post, not to Keller. Price gave him a full face-to-face briefing, walking him through the assignments, the search results, and the status of every crew. Only after that briefing did Reed key his radio. Battalion 7, assuming Maple Court Command. Dispatch acknowledged it. This time it was a complete and formal transfer, not an emergency assumption made in the dark. With command finally stable, Reed walked over to Keller. He did not raise his voice. What is the basis for detaining my captain? Keller laid it out. Possible impersonation, an accusation of threats, property damage. Reed pulled out a tablet and turned the screen toward him. It showed the fire department's computer-aided dispatch system, known inside the department as Fire CAD Engine 14. Officer, Captain Aisha Monroe, on scene. Initial command, Monroe. The personnel roster matched. The apparatus assignment matched. The dispatch record matched. Keller looked at it for a long moment. Her employment and rank are verified, he finally said, but he did not remove the cuffs. I still have a complaint involving threats and property damage. The reason for holding her had quietly changed. He was no longer holding her to find out who she was. He was holding her while an accusation got checked out, and that is a very different question. While that was happening, Officer Elena Ruiz sat down with Gregory privately, her body camera running. "Tell me exactly what Captain Monroe threatened to do," she said. "She said police would move me," he answered. "Did she threaten to hit you?" "No." "Did she threaten to hurt you?" "No." "Did she threaten you with a weapon?" "No." Ruiz moved to the door. "What did she say about it?" "She said firefighters would force it if I couldn't get the key in time." "Did she say she wanted to damage your property for any reason unrelated to the fire?" "No." There was a pause, and then Gregory said the one thing that actually mattered. "I just didn't believe she was really in charge." Separately, Ruiz spoke with Maya, who had been standing a few feet away for most of the encounter. Maya confirmed that Aisha never raised her voice at Gregory and never used the word threat. She said Aisha's exact words were about police moving him behind the line, not about hurting him. There was no violent threat in Gregory's own account. There was no assault, and there was no impersonation. His account cannot prove exactly why he refused to accept her authority in the moment. But it raises a harder question. Whose authority was Gregory prepared to recognize at first glance, and whose authority did he immediately doubt? The later investigation could not determine what was in Gregory's head that night. It did not determine discriminatory intent. It identified race and gender stereotypes as relevant context, not as a proven motive. Fire dispatch pulled the full radio log for investigators. It showed Engine 14 establishing command shortly after arrival. It showed dispatch acknowledging that command within a minute. It showed Aisha ordering the rear door forced only after crews reported worsening smoke conditions. Gregory's complaint to Keller came after all of that. Keller's approach to the command post came after that. The handcuffing happened after that. Only once Aisha was off the radio did Price make his emergency assumption of command. Only a few minutes after that did the search team find the resident in apartment 212. Investigators laid the fire radio log next to Keller's body camera timestamps, minute by minute. The two records lined up exactly. There was no gap where Aisha could have established command after the confrontation instead of before it. In other words, the fire department's own records confirmed. Aisha was in command well before Gregory ever complained, and well before Keller ever asked who she was. Ruiz reported back that there was no evidence of a violent threat. Reed confirmed the assignment. The fire department's own data confirmed the rank in the unit. Sergeant Harris, the ranking police supervisor on scene, reviewed the fire CAD printout, the dispatch summary, Aisha's identification, and Keller's stated reasoning. He gave the order to remove the cuffs. Aisha did not try to take command back from Reed. He was still holding it properly, and she knew that. The fire was brought under control not long after. 2 residents were taken to the hospital for smoke exposure. There were no deaths. Investigators found nothing connecting the detention itself to any physical injury. Aisha submitted a written request that all relevant records be preserved. The fire department's records officer preserved the CAD data and radio traffic. The police supervisor preserved both officers' body camera footage and the police dispatch log. Property management preserved nearby security video. The city's review office began collecting everything into a single case file. When investigators read Keller's written report, one line stood out. Keller wrote that Aisha continued to dispute the detention and reached toward communications equipment after being ordered to keep her hands visible. The body camera footage told a narrower story. She stayed at the command post the entire time. She never tried to leave, and she never tried to push past him. There was exactly one reach toward the radio. It came only after she explained, more than once, exactly what she intended to do and why. Investigators did not conclude that Keller invented what happened. They concluded that his report was materially incomplete and created a misleading impression of resistance. It left out that Aisha stayed in place, did not pull away, announced what she intended to do, and reached for the incident command radio she had already told him she needed. Within days, the city assigned the case to an outside public safety investigator, not to either department involved. 4 weeks later, the Independent Review Board completed its findings. The review board included that independent investigator, a professional standards representative, an incident command expert with no connection to either department, and a city legal representative. The police and fire departments were only allowed to supply records. Neither one got to decide the outcome on its own. The board spent several weeks on the case. It interviewed Aisha, Keller, Ruiz, Price, Reed, and Maya separately, so that no one's account could be shaped by hearing another's first. It cross-checked every radio transmission against both departments' recordings and against Keller's and Ruiz's body camera footage, minute by minute. The board also looked at whether Aisha's own conduct needed review, specifically the moment she reached for the radio after being told to keep her hands visible. It found that her single reach, made after repeated verbal warning of her intent, did not amount to resisting detention under the department's own use of force and compliance standards. That finding was recorded alongside the findings against Keller, not separately from them. Before any findings became final, Keller was given the complete file and a chance to respond. He maintained that the movement toward the radio had created a genuine officer safety concern in the moment. The board considered his response, and it did not change the underlying video. After that review, the department moved the case through its own formal disciplinary process, using the board's findings as the basis for it. The findings themselves were specific. Aisha was the officer properly assigned to command at Engine 14. That fact could have been confirmed through fire dispatch before any handcuffs were used. Keller tried police CAD and never switched to the correct channel, even after being told directly where the answer was. On command coordination, the board did not conclude that Keller had no right to detain a firefighter. It concluded that he unnecessarily prolonged the detention without coordinating a safe transfer of command, after there was no longer any immediate safety threat. On the written report, the board found that Keller had some basis to note that Aisha moved toward communications equipment. But his report overstated that movement as repeated, and left out that she never tried to leave the command post and that the equipment in question was the radio she needed to formally hand off command. That part of the complaint was sustained. A separate finding addressed the forced door. The later operational review found that the forcible entry was consistent with this department's emergency procedures and with the conditions documented at the scene that night. Once the findings were sustained, the police department applied its disciplinary schedule. Keller received a 10-day unpaid suspension. He was removed from active fire scene assignments for 6 months. Before returning to unrestricted patrol, he was required to complete interagency command training and remedial report writing instruction. His reports were placed under supervised review for a set period afterward. There was no arrest at the scene, no public humiliation, and no immediate firing. Investigators found insufficient evidence that Gregory knowingly filed a false criminal report. His complaint stayed part of the record, but no criminal charge followed. The review also pointed to 3 separate system failures. Police records and fire records were not directly connected, so officers had no fast way to confirm someone's rank, unit, or role at a scene. There was no standard procedure for what happens if a fire department's current incident commander is detained by police. Cross-agency verification depended entirely on an officer knowing which system actually held the answer. 3 new procedures came out of the review. The first was a one-call fire verification process. A single request to dispatch could now confirm a person's rank, unit, duty assignment, and current role at an incident. An officer no longer had to guess based on a badge, a vest, or a bystander's word. Before the policy went citywide, both departments ran it through a joint tabletop drill, walking a simulated detention scenario through dispatch step by step to make sure the new radio language actually worked in real time. The second addressed command continuity, when circumstances reasonably allow it, and the person holding command is not creating an immediate safety threat. Officers are expected to help identify a replacement, wait for that transfer to go out over the radio, and get dispatch's acknowledgement before continuing a detention on other grounds. This protocol does not delay immediate action when the commander presents an urgent safety threat, or when a lawful arrest cannot reasonably wait. The third separated emergency property damage from vandalism. Investigators must now determine whether damage occurred as part of an active emergency response and whether there is any actual evidence of criminal intent apart from that response. 2 months later, a small fire broke out at a restaurant downtown. A new officer was sent to help manage the road closure around the block. He needed to coordinate the closure directly with whoever was running the fire scene, so he keyed his radio. Dispatch confirmed the current fire incident commander for traffic coordination. A few seconds later, dispatch answered, "Confirmed, Battalion 7 has command." "Copy," he said, and went to find the right person. The whole exchange took less than 15 seconds. Before the new procedure, that same question had taken nearly 20 minutes, a set of handcuffs, and an outside investigation to resolve. Across the street, Aisha was working the scene with Engine 14 when she heard the exchange over the radio. She did not look at a camera. She did not make a statement. Nobody applauded. The new procedure simply worked the way it was supposed to. Aisha Monroe never needed a burning building to prove she was a fire captain. Fire dispatch had already confirmed that, long before Keller ever reached the command post. The answer was already on the radio. The failure was refusing to ask the right channel in time. This has been a fictional reconstruction, created to illustrate how procedure, evidence, and accountability can work when a system is used correctly.